Okay. All right. Today we're going to remove the bearing out of this really old 608 caster bearing. So the first thing is, if it's really old and you don't know anything about it, then we recommend you use 3-in-1 penetrating oil. So I'm just going to put this on there, and what we're trying to do is break the corrosion between the aluminum caster and the hardened ground steel bearing. And the reason why this is important is because the bearings conduct electricity differently than the caster, and so they can actually weld themselves together. So I'm just going to let that, if this were really corroded, then what I would normally do is I'd leave this overnight. But for the sake of this demonstration purposes, we're not going to be able to do that. So this is an 8mm extractor, and you have a bearing and a spacer and a bearing, okay? So let me get some pliers, and we're going to, what I like to do is I like to slip the bearing in. Oh. So what's happening here is the extractor, the spacer in there is preventing the bearing from sliding in. Once I do that, then I will hand tighten this. So I'm just grabbing the nut and I'm hand tightening that, okay? Then I'm gonna take my wrench, I'm gonna take my other wrench, and we're gonna tighten down that nut. And everyone asks me how tight is tight. So if you tighten it too much, the nut will break. And it breaks at 40,000 PSI. So if you come back and say, hey, the nut broke, then I'm gonna tell you, you cranked it down way too hard. But what I'm doing is I'm tightening it, and then I'm just giving it a little bit more of a, it's like 1/8 of an inch more. So I tighten it to where it's tight, and then I just a little 1/8 of an inch more. I'm not cranking it, I'm not using all my muscles, I'm not doing all that stuff. I'm just tightening down this thing. And it may pop out, and I may have to do this again because I just put oil all over everything. So now that it's tight, what I'm going to do is flip it over. I'm going to use a punch. You can tell we've used this punch quite a bit. That's aluminum and that's brass, and we've sanded it down. So I'm going to use this punch in there, and I'm going to move the camera back a little bit. I'm going to tap out that bearing. And you can see, because of the oil, that it did not tap out the first time. That's okay. We're just going to wipe down the oil, and we're going to do this again. So then I take my wrench and my 2 wrenches, and I open it up. Let's scoot this back in frame. I open it up. So now it's loose. And it's jammed in there, so I may have a hard time. So I'm just going to tap this back out. I want this to be loose before I put it back in again. So let me put it back in so it's seated all the way in. I shook the caster so that I'd move that spacer out of the way. And now I'm just going to tighten it back up. And we're going to do this again. And this time I'm going to make it a little bit tighter. But you're not trying to crank on these things. You're not trying to break anything. So that's where it's tight. That's where I'm getting tighter. And there we go. All right, let's see if that works. All right, let me move the camera out of the way. All right, and voila, we have taken the bearing out. Now, to get this bearing off, I'm gonna grab my wrench, my 2 wrenches, move the camera back. I'm gonna grab my 2 wrenches, and I'm gonna undo the screw. And now it's stuck in there, and that's okay. That's why we have all this stuff. So I have my spacer. So I'm just gonna put this right like that. Put it back out. And if it's stuck in there, I'm just gonna tap down. There we go. So now, there is the spacer now, right? And again, it's smashed up in there, so I'm gonna take my hammer. This is soft aluminum. We want it to be soft. We want it to expand and hold the inside of that bearing to be able to pull this out. So now I'm loose. I've got the bearing out of one side, and I've got my spacer out in another. So I'm gonna put my bearings over to the side, my spacer over to the side, and now we're gonna take this one out. Now the cheating way to do it is just pop it out here, but if you wanna do it the right way, we're gonna do this all over again. We're gonna slide this in, I'm gonna tighten this down. I'm gonna grab my wrench, This time I'm gonna put the big one down and I'll put the small one on top. And there we go, we're gonna tighten down the wrench. There we go, so we're tightening. Then, oh, no, that just it loosened up. That's okay. So then we're just gonna pop this out. Yeah. I think we may have popped that nut. Let me just see. Yeah, so we have popped that nut, see? So we put too much force on it. That's okay. If that happens to you, we'll send you a new one. So let me go get that.